Stepmom tried to steal my college fund that my dad offered and then got me kicked out after accusing me of I, 18M, am in a difficult situation with my stepmom Megan, 40F, regarding my college fund, and I'm starting to question everything. This is a long and complicated situation, so bear with me. Some background: my parents divorced when I was 10. It was a messy split that left me feeling lost and alone for a long time. My dad, 45M, remarried Megan when I was 14, and she brought 2 kids from her previous marriage into our family, Jack, 16M, and Emma, 13F. The transition wasn't easy, and we've never really felt like a cohesive family unit despite Megan's constant efforts to push the one big happy family narrative. I've always been a good student, maintaining a 3.8 GPA throughout high school. My dream is to attend a prestigious university and study engineering. I've participated in the robotics club, where I've won several competitions, and I've volunteered at the local animal shelter for the past 3 years. Dad's always been supportive of my academic goals, at least until recently. A few months ago, as I was starting to apply to colleges, Dad sat me down for a talk. He told me about a substantial college fund he'd been saving for me since I was born. It's enough to cover tuition and living expenses at most top universities. I was thrilled, feeling like my hard work was paying off and my dreams were within reach. We spent hours that night talking about different universities, discussing programs, and planning campus visits. It was one of the best conversations I'd had with Dad in years. The problem started when Megan found out about the college fund. At first, it was subtle. She cornered me in the kitchen one morning when Dad had already left for work. Her tone seemed casual, but there was an edge to her words. She said things like, "You know, when I was your age, I worked my way through college. Took out loans, worked part-time jobs. It really taught me the value of money." I tried to brush it off, telling her that I was planning to get a part-time job too, to cover extra expenses. But Megan said, "But you don't really need to, do you? Not with all that money just being handed to you." From that point on, Megan's comments became more frequent and pointed. She started bringing up stories of self-made individuals at dinner, always with a pointed look in my direction. She'd talk about her friend's son who's working 3 jobs to pay for his engineering degree, or her cousin who paid off her student loans in record time and is now a successful entrepreneur. These stories became a regular feature at our dinner table, always accompanied by comments about responsibility and the value of hard work. Dad would nod along, seemingly oblivious to the implication that I was somehow less responsible or hardworking for accepting his help. The worst part is, Megan started to manipulate Dad. I've overheard her talking to him about how giving me the money might stunt my growth or make me dependent. She keeps pushing the idea that I should work my way through college or take out loans like everyone else. One evening, I overheard them talking in their bedroom. Megan was saying, "I'm just worried about him, honey. Giving him all that money. Don't you think it might make him lazy? Maybe we should consider reducing the fund, or only paying for tuition but not living expenses." To my horror, Dad said something about how he'd always planned to help me with college, but he also acknowledged that Megan might have a point about the value of working for things. Since then, Dad started to waver. He's making comments about maybe reducing the fund, or only paying for tuition but not living expenses. It's like he's forgotten all our previous conversations about my future, all his promises of support. I tried talking to Mom about this, but she and Dad barely communicate. When I explained the situation to her over the phone, she got angry and told me to stand up for myself and not let that woman push me around. Easy for her to say, she doesn't have to live with Megan. Mom's advice, while well-intentioned, doesn't really help me navigate the day-to-day tension at home. Last week, things came to a head when I overheard Megan talking to Jack in the kitchen. I was heading to my room when I heard Megan say, "Don't worry about college, honey. I'm working on getting some of your stepbrother's college fund redirected to your future. It's not fair that he gets such a large sum when you and Emma won't." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only was Megan trying to take away my college fund, but she was actively working to give it to her own kids. The injustice of it made me see red. Without thinking, I stormed into the kitchen and confronted her. Megan's eyes widened in surprise. "Were you eavesdropping?" she asked. I was too angry to care about her accusation. "What do you mean, you're working on my college fund? That's money Dad's been saving for me since I was born." Megan's expression hardened. "I'm simply trying to ensure that all the children in this family are treated fairly," she said. "It's not right for you to get such a large sum when Jack and Emma won't have the same opportunity." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But it's not your money to redistribute," I argued. "Dad saved that for me, long before you were even in the picture." Megan's got angry and said, "Watch your tone, young man, you're being incredibly selfish right now. Have you even considered your step-siblings' futures?" I felt like I was going crazy. Selfish? For wanting to use the money my dad saved for my education? How does that make me selfish? Megan crossed her arms. "A truly responsible adult would understand the importance of fairness in a family. Maybe you should consider community college if you're so worried about money. It would certainly be a more modest, appropriate choice." I was speechless. The audacity of her suggestion left me angry. I looked at Jack, hoping for some support, but he just stared at the floor, clearly uncomfortable. "This is insane," I finally managed to say. "I'm going to talk to Dad about this." Megan smiled and said, "Go ahead. But remember, your father and I are partners. We make decisions together about what's best for this family." I stormed out of the kitchen. I needed to talk to Dad, to make him understand what was happening. But every time I've tried to get him alone since then, Megan's been there, hovering, steering the conversation. The next few days were tense. Megan acted as if nothing had happened, but there was a smugness in her demeanor that made my blood boil. She'd make comments at dinner about the importance of money responsibility and not taking handouts, always with a pointed look in my direction. Dad seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of tension. He'd nod along to Megan's comments, occasionally adding his own anecdote about the value of hard work. It was like he'd forgotten all our previous conversations about my future, all his promises of support. I felt increasingly isolated. Jack and Emma avoided me, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but unwilling to go against their mother. I threw myself into my college applications, determined to secure as many scholarship opportunities as possible, just in case. One evening, I finally managed to corner Dad alone in his study and said that I wanted to talk to him about something. Dad looked up from his computer, his brow furrowed. "What about it, son?" I took a deep breath. Megan's been saying some things. About redistributing the money, about me maybe not using it at all. I thought we had a plan. Dad's expression was hard to read. He sighed. "Your stepmom's raised some valid points about responsibility and the value of working for things," he said slowly. "Maybe we were too hasty in offering you the full amount." I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. "But Dad, you promised," I said. "I've worked so hard, maintained my grades, done everything you asked of me." Dad looked uncomfortable. "I know, son. And we're proud of you. But Megan thinks." "Since when does Megan get to decide my future?" I interrupted, anger finally breaking through. "She's not my mom. She wasn't there all those years you were saving for my education." Dad's expression hardened. "Megan is my wife, and a part of this family. Her opinion matters." "More than your promise to me?" I asked. Before Dad could answer, the study door opened and Megan walked in and asked, "Is everything okay?" Dad said everything's fine. We were just discussing college options. Megan smiled. "Wonderful. I was thinking we could all sit down this weekend and look at some more affordable schools. Maybe some with good work-study programs." I looked at Dad, silently pleading with him to say something, to stand up for me. But he just nodded. I left the study feeling defeated and betrayed. It was clear that Megan had won. My dreams of attending a top university were slipping away. Some additional points that I think are relevant. 1. Megan has never worked outside the home since marrying my dad. She's always talking about the importance of financial independence, but she relies entirely on my dad's income. When I pointed this out once, she got really defensive and said that being a stay-at-home mom was the most important job in the world. 2. When I brought up the unfairness of potentially redirecting my college fund to Jack and Emma, Megan says it's about equality in the family. But she conveniently ignores that my dad started this fund long before she was in the picture. She also ignores the fact that Jack and Emma's bio dad is still in the picture and could potentially contribute to their college funds. 3. I've tried to compromise, suggesting that I could work part-time during college to cover some expenses, but Megan dismisses this as not being responsible enough. She seems to think that unless I'm struggling and stressed about money, I'm not learning the right lessons. 4. Dad seems conflict-averse and often goes along with what Megan says to keep the peace. I'm worried he'll cave to her pressure about the college fund. He's always been this way, even when he was married to my mom. I think it's part of why their marriage fell apart. 5. I've considered reaching out to my grandparents, Dad's parents, about this, but I'm worried it will cause more family drama. They've never been big fans of Megan, and I'm afraid that if they get involved, it will just make the situation at home even more tense. 6. Megan is constantly pushing this one big happy family narrative, but her actions don't match her words. She treats Jack and Emma differently than she treats me, and it's becoming more and more obvious. For example, she never questions their spending habits or lectures them about financial responsibility. 7. I've started to wonder if Megan's pushing so hard against me using the college fund because she wants to use the money for something else. Maybe for a big family vacation, or to renovate the house, or to pay for Jack and Emma's college. But I have no proof of this, just a suspicion. 8. Megan has started making comments about how I should be more grateful for everything she and my dad have done for me. She talks about how they've sacrificed so much to give me a good life. But from my perspective, it's my dad who's made the sacrifices, not her. 9. I'm starting to feel like I'm being gaslit. Megan will say one thing to me when we're alone, then completely deny it or twist her words when Dad's around. It's making me question my own memories. 10. I'm worried that if I push too hard against Megan, she'll convince my dad to kick me out. I'll be 18 soon, and I know they technically won't have any legal obligation to support me anymore. I feel like I'm at a crossroads. If I stand up for myself and insist on using the college fund, I risk damaging my relationship with my dad and making my home life unbearable. If I give in to Megan's demands, I might be giving up on my dreams and setting myself up for a future of financial struggle. Am I the asshole for wanting to accept my dad's college fund? Should I just suck it up and find a way to pay for college myself? I feel like I'm losing my mind here, and I could really use some outside perspective. ETA, edit to add, I realize I should clarify something about the college fund situation. When I mentioned the college fund my dad told me about a few months ago, it wasn't because I felt entitled to it. This fund came as a surprise to me, but it aligned with my dad's consistent encouragement of my academic efforts throughout high school. Although I didn't know about the specific fund until recently, my dad had always assured me that he would support my college education if I maintained good grades. This promise is why I focus so intensely on my studies, maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I understand that I'm not automatically entitled to this money, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity it represents. If my dad had told me he couldn't afford to help with college, I would have understood and found other ways to pay for it. My frustration isn't about feeling entitled, but about the sudden shift in plans after the fund was revealed. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and I wish I had better news to share. Things have gone from bad to worse, and I'm now writing this from my friend Mike's guest room. I've been kicked out of my home, and my relationship with my dad is in ruin. Here's what happened. After my last post, the problems in our house continued to escalate. Megan's comments about my college fund became more frequent and more pointed. She'd bring it up at every opportunity, always with a snide remark about how I needed to learn the value of hard work and independence. Dad remained frustratingly passive, rarely intervening and often nodding along with Megan's words. I tried to keep my head down and focus on my college applications. I spent most of my time in my room, avoiding family dinners and common areas as much as possible. But Megan seemed to take this as a personal problem. She started accusing me of being antisocial and ungrateful, claiming that I was deliberately excluding myself from family time. The breaking point came last weekend. I had finally received an acceptance letter from my dream school, a top-tier engineering program that I've been working towards for years. In my excitement, I forgot about the ongoing problems and rushed downstairs to share the news with Dad. Megan was in the kitchen when I found him, but I was too happy to care. Dad's initial reaction was one of happiness. For a moment, it felt like old times as he hugged me and started asking questions about the program. But then Megan cleared her throat, and the mood in the room instantly changed. She started in on her complaints about financial responsibility. I couldn't take it anymore. All the frustration and anger that had been building up over the past months came pouring out. I confronted Megan about her constant interference, her attempts to redirect my college fund, and her manipulation of my dad. I told her that she had no right to try and take away something that my dad had been saving for me since before she was even in the picture. The argument quickly escalated. Megan's face turned red with anger as she started shouting about how ungrateful and selfish I was. She accused me of never accepting her as part of the family, of always treating her and her children as outsiders. Dad tried to intervene, but neither of us was listening at that point. In the heat of the moment, I said some things I'm not proud of. I called Megan a gold digger who was only interested in my dad's money. I accused her of trying to steal my college fund for her own kids. I even brought up the fact that she had never worked a day since marrying my dad, despite her constant preaching about financial independence. Megan's reaction was explosive. She turned to my dad and, through tears, told him that she couldn't live like this anymore. She said she felt unsafe in her own home, that I had been hostile and aggressive towards her for years. And then she dropped the bombshell that would change everything. Megan claimed that I had been making inappropriate advances towards her for months. She said that I had been cornering her when we were alone, making suggestive comments, and even trying to touch her inappropriately. She painted a picture of herself as a terrified victim who had been too scared to speak up until now. I was stunned into silence. The accusation was so outrageous, so completely fabricated, that I couldn't even form words to defend myself. I looked to my dad, expecting him to see through this obvious lie. But the moment I saw his face, I just knew that he was staring at me with a mixture of disgust and disappointment that I had never seen before. I tried to defend myself, to explain that Megan was lying, but Dad wouldn't listen. He seemed to have already made up his mind. In a voice shaking with anger, he told me to go to my room while he and Megan discussed what to do. I spent the next few hours pacing in my room, alternating between anger and disbelief. I couldn't understand how my dad could believe such an outrageous lie. I tried to think of ways to prove my innocence, but it was my word against Megan's, and it was clear whose side my dad had chosen. Later that evening, Dad came to my room. His face was grim, and he couldn't even look me in the eye as he spoke. He said that he couldn't have someone who would act so inappropriately living under his roof. He told me I had until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live. I tried once again to plead my case, to make him see reason, but he wouldn't hear it. He just kept repeating that he was disappointed in me and that he never thought I could do something like this. Before he left, he handed me an envelope containing some cash, to help me get started, he said. I packed up my belongings in a daze, still unable to believe what was happening. Jack and Emma avoided me completely, no doubt having been told some version of Megan's lies. I tried one last time to talk to Dad, to make him see the truth, but Megan was always there, playing the part of the traumatized victim. I reached out to my mom, explaining the situation through tears. She was furious and wanted to confront Dad and Megan immediately, but I begged her not to. I was afraid it would only make things worse, and a small part of me still hoped that Dad would come to his senses on his own. Fortunately, my friend Mike came through for me in a big way. When I told him what had happened, he immediately offered his guest room. His parents are out of town for a few months on a work assignment, so I can stay here without causing any trouble for his family. Now, I'm trying to adjust to life in Mike's house. He's been incredibly supportive, but I can't help feeling like a burden. I'm trying to contribute where I can, cooking meals, doing chores, but it's not the same as having my own place. I've been alternating between anger and despair. How could my dad believe such a horrible lie? How could he throw away our relationship, all the years of memories and trust, based on Megan's word alone? And how could Megan do this? I knew she didn't like me, but to accuse me of something so horrible, to deliberately destroy my relationship with my dad, it's a level of cruelty I can't even comprehend. I've thought about going to my grandparents, but I'm afraid of how they'll react to Megan's accusations. What if they believe her too? I couldn't bear to see that same look of disgust and disappointment on their faces. I've also considered going to the police, to file a report about Megan's false accusations. But I'm not sure what good it would do. It's not like she's made these claims publicly or tried to press charges. And I'm afraid that involving the authorities might just make my dad double down on his belief in Megan's lies. My mom has offered to let me stay with her, but she lives in another state. Moving there would mean giving up on my dream school, on the future I've been working towards for years. But I'm starting to wonder if I have any other choice. Megan's lie has destroyed everything, and there seems to be nothing I can do about it. My dad, the person who was supposed to know me better than anyone, who was supposed to have my back no matter what, has chosen to believe the worst about me without even giving me a chance to defend myself. I've been going over every interaction I've had with Megan, trying to understand where this lie came from. Was it just an opportunistic move when she saw how angry I was during our argument? Or had she been planning this for a while, waiting for the right moment to get rid of me for good? Either way, the level of calculation and cruelty involved makes me feel sick. As for my college fund, I have no idea what's going to happen to it now. Will Megan give it all to Jack and Emma? Will my dad use it to pay for my dream school even though he thinks I'm some kind of predator? I've been trying to figure out my next steps. Mike has helped me find a part-time job at a local grocery store. It's not much, but it's something to help me contribute to household expenses and save a little for the future. Every time I try to think practically about my situation, I'm overwhelmed by a wave of anger and hurt. I've considered reaching out to Megan's ex-husband, Jack and Emma's dad. Maybe he has some insight into her behavior, some experience with her lies. But I'm afraid of opening up that can of worms. The reality of my situation is starting to sink in. I'm relying on the kindness of a friend, with limited funds, no permanent place to live. The unfairness of it all is almost too much to bear. I did everything right, I studied hard, I stayed out of trouble, I worked towards my goals. And in the span of a single weekend, it's all been taken away from me because of one person's lies. I'm trying to stay strong, to not let this break me. I keep telling myself that the truth will come out eventually, that my dad will realize what Megan has done and come looking for me to apologize. But with each passing day, that hope feels more and more like a childish fantasy. I'm not sure what my next update will bring. For now, I want to thank everyone who read my original post and offered advice. I'm sorry I couldn't take action on most of it before everything fell apart. If anyone has been through a similar situation or has any advice on how to move forward from here, I would be incredibly grateful. I feel lost and alone, and any guidance would be welcome. I'll try to post another update when I have more news. Until then, wish me luck. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Update 2. It's been about 2 weeks since my last update, and a lot has happened. I'm still living at Mike's place, but there's been an unexpected development that I needed to update. I was at work, restocking shelves at the grocery store, when I got a call from my grandparents. I almost didn't answer. I'd been avoiding calls from unknown numbers, afraid it might be Dad or Megan trying to contact me. But something told me to pick up, and I'm glad I did. As soon as I heard my grandmother's voice, I knew something was wrong. She sounded worried and confused, asking if I was okay and if I was safe. At first, I didn't understand what was going on. Then she mentioned that Dad had called them, telling them some disturbing news about why I'd left home. I got extremely scared, that Megan's lies had spread beyond just Dad. I asked my grandmother what exactly Dad had told them, and her response confirmed my worst fears. Dad had told them about Megan's false accusations, painting me as some kind of predator who had been making inappropriate advances towards my stepmother. I felt sick to my stomach. It was bad enough that Dad believed these lies, but now my grandparents too? I couldn't bear the thought of them looking at me the way Dad had that last night at home, with disgust and disappointment. But as my grandmother kept talking, I realized something. Unlike Dad, who had immediately believed Megan's accusations, my grandparents were skeptical. They knew me, had watched me grow up, and something about this story didn't sit right with them. That's why they were calling, not to condemn me, but to hear my side of the story. For a moment, I was tempted to brush it off, to tell them it was all a misunderstanding and change the subject. I was so tired of trying to defend myself against these horrible lies. But then I realized this might be my only chance to get the truth out there, to have someone in my family believe me. So, I took a deep breath and told them everything. I started from the beginning, explaining about the college fund and Megan's increasing attempts to interfere. I told them about the arguments, about overhearing Megan's plans to redirect the money to Jack and Emma. I described the final confrontation, and how Megan had made up these terrible accusations when she realized she was losing control of the situation. As I spoke, I could hear my grandparents' reactions changing from confusion to shock to anger. They asked questions, wanting to clarify certain points, but mostly they just listened. When I finally finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then my grandfather spoke, his voice hard with suppressed anger. He said they believed me, that they knew I would never do the things Megan had accused me of. He asked why I hadn't come to them sooner, and I admitted that I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, that they'd side with Dad like he had sided with Megan. My grandmothers assured me that they would always be on my side, that they were sorry I'd been going through this alone. Then she said something that made me freeze. They were going to talk to Dad. I panicked a bit, worried that confronting Dad would only make things worse. But my grandparents were adamant. They said that they couldn't stand by and watch their son throw away his relationship with his child over a lie. They promised to call me back after they'd spoken to him. The next few hours were agonizing. I couldn't focus on work. What if Dad didn't listen to them? What if this just made him angry, made him double down on his belief in Megan's lies? Or worse, what if my grandparents changed their minds after talking to him, decided that maybe Megan was telling the truth after all? When my phone finally rang again, I answered it. My grandfather's voice was grave as he explained what had happened. They'd called Dad, confronted him with what I'd told them. Dad had tried to defend Megan at first, but they wouldn't let him brush it off. They demanded to know how he could believe such terrible things about his own son, how he could throw me out without even trying to get to the bottom of things. Apparently, the conversation got heated. My grandfather said that for the first time in years, he'd raised his voice at his son. He'd told Dad that he was making a terrible mistake, that he was being manipulated by Megan and risking losing his relationship with me forever. Then my grandfather dropped a bombshell. He'd told Dad that if he didn't fix this situation, if he didn't at least try to hear me out and get to the truth, they would change their will. All of their assets, the inheritance that Dad had always assumed would be his one day, would go to me instead. I was stunned. I'd never even thought about my grandparents' inheritance, had never considered it as part of my future. To hear that they were willing to use it as leverage to force Dad to see reason was overwhelming. My grandmother got on the phone then. She told me that they were behind me 100%, that they would do whatever it took to help me through this. They offered to let me come stay with them, to help me figure out my college situation. They even said they'd hire a lawyer if necessary, to protect me from any further false accusations from Megan. I was grateful beyond words, but also terrified. This felt like it was spiraling out of control, becoming bigger than just a family dispute. I asked them what Dad's reaction had been to their ultimatum. My grandfathers explained that Dad had been shocked into silence at first, then angry. He'd accused them of taking sides without knowing the full story, of trying to blackmail him. The call had ended with Dad hanging up on them. Now, we're in a waiting game. My grandparents have given Dad a week to reach out to me, to at least attempt to hear my side of the story. If he doesn't, they say they'll follow through on their threat about the inheritance. Part of me hopes this will be the wake-up call Dad needs, that it will make him question Megan's story and remember who I really am. But another part of me is terrified that this will just drive a deeper wedge between us, that Dad will see this as me turning his parents against him. As for my living situation, things with Mike are still okay, but I know I can't stay here forever. His parents will be back in a few weeks, and while they might be understanding of the situation, I can't impose on them like that. My grandparents offer to let me stay with them is tempting, but they live in another state. I'm still working at the grocery store, trying to save up money, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what I'll need for college. I've been researching scholarships and loans, but without access to my college fund, the numbers just don't add up. The thought of giving up on my dream school, of settling for a cheaper option or delaying college altogether, is heartbreaking. I've also been dealing with the emotional fallout of all this. Some days, I can barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all. Other days, I'm angry, wanting to confront Dad and Megan and force them to admit the truth. Mike's been great, listening when I need to vent and giving me space when I need to be alone, but I know this situation is stressing him out too. My mom's been calling regularly, still offering to let me come stay with her. I appreciate her support, I just can't just leave. Plus, a small, petty part of me doesn't want to give Dad and Megan the satisfaction of driving me away completely. So now, I wait. I wait to see if Dad will reach out, if he'll be willing to listen to the truth. I'll try to post another update when I have more news. Until then, wish me luck. I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and the situation has completely exploded. I'm still processing everything that's happened, but I'll try to lay it out as clearly as I can. Brace yourselves, because this is going to be a long one. About a month after my grandparents gave my dad their ultimatum, I got a call from him. His voice was shaking, and he sounded like he'd been crying. He asked if we could meet in person, saying he had something important to tell me. I was wary, but agreed to meet him at a local coffee shop. When I saw him, I barely recognized him. He looked like he'd aged years in just a few months, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders. As soon as we sat down, he broke down completely, sobbing and begging for my forgiveness. He explained that he discovered the truth about Megan's lies. Apparently, she'd been cheating on him with her ex-husband, Jack and Emma's father, for the past few months. Not only that, but she was pregnant, and the timing made it clear that the baby couldn't be my dad's. Dad had overheard Megan on the phone with her ex, discussing their plans for the future. He didn't get the full picture from that one conversation, but it was enough to make him suspicious. He started paying more attention, noticing inconsistencies in Megan's stories and behavior. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Dad came home early one day and found Megan and her ex in a compromising position. When confronted, Megan didn't immediately admit to everything. Instead, she tried to gaslight Dad, insisting that he was imagining things and that her ex was just there to discuss something about the kids. But Dad wasn't buying it anymore. He demanded the truth, and what came out was even worse than he'd imagined. Megan and her ex had reconnected a few months ago, supposedly while discussing issues related to Jack and Emma. One thing led to another, and they started an affair. However, as the truth unfolded, it became clear that Megan's deception went beyond just the affair. She admitted that she had been unhappy in the marriage for a while, feeling like she had rushed into it without fully moving on from her ex. Instead of addressing these issues honestly, she had chosen to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Megan confessed that she had seen Dad's college fund for me as a threat to her financial security. She didn't have direct access to it, but she had been subtly pushing Dad to consider using that money for other purposes, like home renovations or family vacations. Her plan was to gradually erode the fund while securing her own financial position. The false accusations against me were part of this plan, though Megan tried to downplay her role in it. She claimed that she had genuinely felt uncomfortable around me at times, but admitted to exaggerating and twisting events to paint me in a bad light. Her goal was to create distance between Dad and me, ensuring that I wouldn't interfere with her plans. When Dad confronted Megan with all of this, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Instead, she tried to spin a new lie, claiming that her ex had manipulated her, that she was a victim too. She cried and pleaded, saying she'd made a mistake but that she truly loved Dad. But the act fell apart when her ex, angry at being thrown under the bus, showed Dad text messages and emails proving that Megan had been an eager participant in the affair and the manipulation. Some of the messages detailed their plans for the future, including how they would handle the divorce and divide assets. The cruelty of it all was staggering. Megan had not only betrayed Dad's trust with the affair, but she'd been actively working to undermine his relationship with me and secure her own financial future at our expense. She'd played on Dad's insecurities and his desire to make his new marriage work, all while plotting her exit strategy. Dad was a mess as he told me all this. He kept apologizing, saying he knew he didn't deserve my forgiveness but that he hoped someday I might be able to trust him again. He told me he was filing for divorce immediately and would do everything in his power to make things right. The divorce proceedings have been a nightmare. Megan, realizing that her plan had fallen apart, is now trying to get as much as she can before the divorce is finalized. She's claiming that she's entitled to half of everything, including the house and Dad's retirement savings. Dad had filed for divorce immediately after discovering Megan's affair, but the legal wheels turned slowly. We've been through countless preliminary hearings and failed mediation attempts. Our lawyer says it could be another 6 months to a year before everything is finalized. Fortunately, the evidence of her infidelity and the manipulative nature of her actions is working in Dad's favor. In our state, while adultery doesn't automatically disqualify a spouse from receiving alimony, it is taken into consideration when determining spousal support. The judge has been unsympathetic to Megan's claims, especially given the existence of those damning text messages and emails. Megan's pregnancy has complicated matters. She's trying to use it as leverage, hinting that the baby might be Dad's after all and that he shouldn't abandon his child. However, given the timeline of her affair and Dad's evidence, it's highly unlikely that the baby is his. Dad's lawyer has advised him to request a paternity test once the baby is born, but for now, Megan can't use the pregnancy as effectively to manipulate the situation. As for my college fund, it turns out Megan couldn't directly access it, but she had been pressuring Dad to withdraw money from it for various family expenses. Dad, wanting to keep the peace and believing Megan's lies about me not deserving the money, had agreed a few times. He's promised to replace every penny, even if he has to work 2 jobs to do it. The most infuriating part is how Megan continues to try to manipulate everyone around her. She's told Jack and Emma that Dad is trying to steal her baby, that he's abusive and they need to testify against him in the divorce proceedings. She's reached out to family friends, spinning a story of being a misunderstood wife who made a mistake but deserves a second chance. She even had the audacity to call me, crying and saying that she never meant for things to go this far, that she was just scared and confused. She tried to convince me that if I told Dad I forgave her, maybe we could all be a family again. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost laughable, but it still made me feel sick to my stomach. Jack and Emma are caught in the middle of this nightmare. They'd been spending more time with their dad recently, not knowing that their parents were rekindling their relationship behind my dad's back. When everything came out, they were devastated. They've reached out to me and Dad, apologizing for not standing up for me and explaining that Megan had fed them lies about me too. Megan had told them that I was jealous of them and trying to sabotage their relationship with Dad. She'd convinced them that I was unstable and potentially violent, which is why they had avoided me in those last few weeks before I left. Learning the truth has been a huge blow to them, and they're struggling to come to terms with who their mother really is. Dad has been trying to make amends in every way he can think of. He's reached out to my grandparents, thanking them for standing by me and apologizing for not listening to them sooner. He's offered to pay for therapy for me, recognizing the emotional trauma this whole ordeal has caused. He's even trying to make things right with my mom, acknowledging that his poor choices have put an unfair burden on her. As for me, I'm still trying to process everything. Part of me is relieved that the truth is finally out, that I've been vindicated and my dad finally believes me. But another part of me is angry that it took this level of betrayal for him to see the truth, angry that I had to go through months of pain and uncertainty because he couldn't trust his own son over a woman he'd only known for a few years. I've moved back home for now, into my old room. It's strange being back here, knowing everything that's happened. Dad and I are walking on eggshells around each other, both of us unsure how to rebuild our relationship. We're going to start family therapy soon, hoping to work through some of the hurt and mistrust that's built up. My college plans are back on track. Dad has promised to do whatever it takes to make sure I can attend my dream school, and I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. My grandparents have been incredibly supportive, offering both emotional and financial help if I need it. The legal battles are far from over. Megan is fighting tooth and nail for every penny she can get, dragging out the divorce proceedings with constant demands and accusations. Her lawyer has tried to paint her as a devoted wife and stepmother who made a one-time mistake, but the evidence of her manipulative behavior is damaging her case. Dad's lawyer has been pushing for a fair but firm settlement. Given Megan's infidelity and the premeditated nature of her deception, she's unlikely to get the windfall she was hoping for. The judge seems inclined to award her only the bare minimum required by law, which is a small victory in this mess. There's also the question of potential criminal charges. The lawyer has suggested that Megan's actions might constitute fraud, given the level of financial manipulation involved. It's a complex legal area, and Dad is still deciding whether he wants to pursue that avenue or just focus on finalizing the divorce and moving on with our lives. Megan's ex isn't getting off scot-free either. His involvement in the affair and subsequent manipulation has come to light, and he's facing his own legal troubles. His current wife, yes, he was married this whole time, has filed for divorce, and there's talk of his company firing him due to the scandal. It's a small consolation, but it does feel like some form of justice. As I sit here writing this update, I'm struck by how quickly and thoroughly one person's lies can destroy multiple lives. Megan walked away from the wreckage she created without a backward glance, leaving the rest of us to pick up the pieces. It's going to be a long road to recovery for all of us. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe again. The truth is out, my name is cleared, and I have my dad back, even if our relationship is fragile right now. It's more than I dared to hope for during those dark days when I thought I'd lost everything. To everyone who's been following my story and offering support, thank you. Your kind words and advice have been a lifeline during this ordeal. I'll post another update if there are any significant developments, but for now, I'm focusing on healing and moving forward. Wish us luck. After everything that's happened, I think we're going to need it.